Hello, and welcome back to LendAPI Academy. My name is Kay, and this is episode 4 in our Introduction to LendAPI series. In this series, we're going to be walking through all of the features and functionalities of LendAPI and teaching you how to build a lending product utilizing our platform. So with that being said, let's get started. We left off the last video teaching you how to populate your variable library utilizing Variable Studio. Once you have a library ready to go, the next step is to start to build the product itself. So we offer 3 main functions to start building your product: the Product Studio, the Rule Studio, and the Pricing Engine. All 3 of these are uniquely tied to each other and interact in very specific ways. And you as a user can actually start on any of these and offer the versatility to switch these around and change and update as you go. I myself like to start with the Product Studio. So for this video, I will be walking through how to build a user experience utilizing LendAPI's Product Studio. The best way to understand LendAPI's Product Studio is to visualize it very much as a website builder. It offers you all of the components and out-of-the-box component library for you to be able to set up an application or a form or intake of any kind for your user. So what we want to do is actually build a pre-approval application utilizing the Product Studio with LendAPI. When you navigate to Product Studio, the first thing you'll realize is if you are a first-time user, it's probably not going to be populated. I myself have built a couple of test cases already, and for that, I will start to build one more. To build, all you have to do is add a new product. When you add a new product within Product Studio, you will see the name of the product you want to specify. So for us, because we are building a pre-approval flow to start, I will name this with our lender name as well as loan type. Below that, you'll see our 2 different product types. One is for our consumer or applicant onboarding. So the best way to understand this is your average consumer application or client application. If you're looking to set a personal loan or a credit card or even a small business loan, this would be the best use case for you. The tenant onboarding is more so set to onboard businesses or banks or credit unions or even other lenders. If you are a part of a larger ecosystem of different lenders and you require a multitude of different rules and criteria to onboard, and then subsequently those lenders will set their own products, this would be a good use case for that. For us, because we are going directly to the consumer, we're going to be leveraging the applicant onboarding. After that, we can choose our template. LendAPI has an array of different templates for you to leverage. We will be doing a personal loan, so we will be choosing the personal loan template. And with that, we can add our product. You'll notice that the product name and the version is added as soon as you publish your first product. And within that, you'll also see a couple of different menu types next to the product. The first is what we call our start application. This will come in handy in a little bit when we're ready to test the application itself. Next to it is an URL. As a customer of LendAPI, each product gets their own unique URL that you get to set and define once you're ready to launch. So if you want to send out URLs in any marketing campaign, you can copy it directly from here. And of course, we have the preview button, which is readily available for you to utilize as you build. And with that, let's start building. So let's click on the Pizza Personal Loan, and this will take us into our template itself. So with that, we chose the personal loan template within LendAPI's Product Studio. So it has pre-filled in some of the details that are common in a personal loan, such as application, borrower details, offer details, and even bank details. But we have set up our own variable studio, so we would like to utilize our own variables and build out a customized application. So instead of utilizing this template, I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start with a clean slate. To do so, all I have to do is remove these tabs up here within Product Studio. And to remove tabs, all you have to do is click Remove Tabs. And one unique feature is within the Product Studio, you'll see these tabs appear as different pages, which is actually exactly what will happen once you release this product. Once you publish this product, each of these tabs are actually individual pages that will be navigated to by the user. So let's go ahead and remove the rest of these tabs and create our own product. Once we remove the last tab, we start with a clean slate. And you'll notice that our edit menus on both sides of the canvas has disappeared. But don't worry, they'll come back once we start to edit our product. So let's do it. I'm going to go ahead and create a new tab. The first one I will call the personal information, which we'll be collecting from our users. And as you can see, my canvas has repopulated, as well as my rules. So with that, you'll notice that each page has a pre-populated continue button, which allows the users to navigate to the next page in a multi-step process. So let's start dragging in some of our variables that we've created. So on this left side, you'll see we have a list of variables, and these are pulled directly from our variable studio, which is why it's very important for you to set up your variable studio. Next to it, we have our widgets. These are utilized in partnership with your integration partners. So if you do have integrations set up with Plaid, Auth for banking, or CRA or Proof, you can drag and drop these widgets directly into your canvas, and once you publish, the user will be able to utilize these widgets like they would any other Plaid product. And of course, our controls. These are unique controls such as checkboxes, document uploads, as well as a rich text editor that allows you to customize each page of your application with unique texts or actions. For us, we are doing a simple pre-approval application, so we're going to start with our personal information, which we have as first and last name. So once I start pulling in our variables, you'll notice that we have a few different variables that are actually named the exact same. So this is where the variable code becomes very important. You'll see that this particular variable, though has the same label, does not have the variable code pizza that we are leveraging. So this is actually not the variable we want to use for our custom product. Let's pick another one. You'll see once I click on this variable that this variable code is the one that I want. This matches the one I created with my variable studio. And once I've completed this, you'll realize that with each variable, there's a property associated in Product Studio for you to add more actions to this variable. This means that you can set this variable as a required field. You can pre-populate this variable from a data source such as a database or even a lead gen. We can also set helper texts and mask certain variables, as well as set up dependency and display rules. For us, we will simply set this as a required variable and continue. After our first name, we will put in our last name. And again, you start to notice that there is more than one last name variable in my variable studio. So I need to make sure I have the right variable code in this instance. So I will go ahead and take this out and put the right variable in. And to take out a variable from this canvas, you simply drag this back into the variable studio and then drag the right variable in its place. And this, as you can see by the engine name, is the right variable code. And we'll also set this one as required. And going forward, we will continue with the rest of the variables, including our date of birth and our married boolean. And you will see for the date of birth, because it is set as a date, it has that pre-populated date format for the users, as well as a calendar picker preset. And for our Boolean variable, you'll also see we have the yes no selection dropdown for each user to utilize as well. So with that, I think we've set enough variables in this first personal information page to move on to the next page. So before moving on, we are going to want to save this form. And you'll see here we have a save form button for you to make sure you save all the work as you go. And that's one of the important features you have to understand with LendAPI is you must save as you go. Otherwise, you risk the potential of losing some of the work that you do. But when I click the save form, you'll see that there is an error that I can't save because there isn't a step preset in this selector. So with that, I actually have to set a next step for this, and so that the product studio understands what the action would be once this continue button is clicked. So for me, I think I'm going to set this as the last step because I don't actually have any other tabs added. And once I set this, I should be able to save my form successfully. So let's add a few new tabs. I think for our pre-approval product, we will do it with 3 tabs. So after personal information, we will do our address as the next tab, and employment as the last tab. And you will see as you start to add tabs that you can actually set your next step to be one of these new tabs that you've added. So now that I have more than one, I can actually set my next step to be address once you move on from personal information, and I can save this form. So let's populate our address. We've added a few new fields in our variable studio, one of them being address. And I think what I'll do is I'll also add a helper text for this particular address to make sure we have the format. And you'll see once I add this helper text, this will appear for the user next to the address field to help as a tooltip. Next to address, I will add city, this will be a required field, and then we will add state, and zip. I'm checking each of these code names to make sure that it matches up with our desired code name that we set in Variable Studio so that we can make sure it matches back to the right variables, because we will be utilizing this in our other functions at a later date. So we have all of these ready to go, and now we're ready to save this form. But before we do, we always have to set, again, the next step. So for this, I think after address, we're going to set employment as the next step. And we can save this form and then continue to employment, which will be our last step for our pre-approval application. For employment, I added a couple of new fields in our variable studio, including employer name, which we'll leave right now as not required, and employment type. You notice here for employment type, I set it as a list format so that users can select from a free preset of lists that I populated. This will be a required field for users. And then finally, I will put in our monthly income and expenses as part of this page. Please note, as I'm building out this application, pre-approval application, if there is at any time you make a mistake you can always come back and change it at a later date. None of this is set in stone, and the LendAPI does give you the versatility to version each of your application versions and be able to leverage them at a future date. So now that we have our last page set, I'm going to make sure that this is set as the last step within our application. And you'll also see within our Rule Studio that we do have a decision tree. And this is to tie back to our Rule Studio right here. So once we've built out our actual rules and decisions, we can tie back to the application. But for now, we don't quite have a rule ready to go. So we'll just make sure that the application itself is set and each of the page is functioning correctly. When we're ready, we're going to save this form and start to play around with these different pages. So I just want to make sure we have one last look before we publish. So I'm actually going to set this as a first step in our pre-approval application. And save everything. And once I'm ready to double check, I can actually click the preview button and be able to preview what my application would look like. Now you'll see we do have a preview to see what the form fields would look like, but within preview you can't actually fill out any of the information. This is simply for you to make sure that each page is aligned with what your intentions are and what you're building out. So it looks like we have all 3 pages ready to go and all 3 steps with a button in place. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this, and I'm going to go ahead and publish this application. One important factor to note here is before you can actually test any application, you must publish it into our product builder. This allows each application to be versioned correctly and to be tested correctly. It's okay if this application, like for example this one, it's not quite ready to be released, but I do want to make sure it's tested. So I'm going to make sure I name this test version 1 for pre-approval. And I will set this as my default version. You'll see in a second why this is. So I'm ready to publish this application, but before I go and test it, I want to show you our version studio. One of the cool features within LendAPI is we make sure everything is versioned correctly. That means our product studio, our rule studio, and our pricing engine all have historical versions as long as you publish all of your work. This is why it's so important to make sure it's published correctly. And we've set this particular application as a default version. This allows the users to set multiple defaults. If they have multiple versions, it means that only one version of this application can be utilized at one time. So if you have multiple test applications that you want to play around with, it will not be live unless you set it as default. This helps with version control and with release management. So everything looks correct here, and now I'm ready to test the application. So to actually test everything, you simply go back to the list page of Product Studio, and you'll see here is a Start Application button under the URL. This will allow you to actually test the application and make sure each of the steps is set correctly. So once I click on that, I will see my application and each of the fields with their properties in place. So let's go through and test it as if we are a user. We will have our first page, which is our personal information, followed by our address page, which was the logical place set in our rules panel. And one thing to note here, we did select state in our variable studio. So when we typed in state, even though we selected this as a string, the LendAPI algorithm automatically picked this up as a drop-down for a state and has populated this for us. And then our final page should be our employment page, which looks like it works. And then because we have not set any sort of rules or decision engine to this application, this is technically where our application currently ends. So until we set in any sort of back-end logic, this is simply an empty application. But it is good to test and see if all of our user experience is in place for this. And looks like it is. And we're ready to go. And you'll see this does present an error message, but that's only because we don't have any logic tied to this currently. But that's okay. We will start to build in logic in our next video. So looks like everything has worked. And if you've followed the steps here, you should also be able to now build your own product in Product Studio. Thank you for watching this video, and hope to catch you on the next one. Thank you.